We'll make a start. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. Salatu wassalamu ala nabiyyina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa ashabihi ajma'in. Amma ba'd. I think Abdullah might he said he would log in. Oh, Ibrahim is doing it very good. So we have reached the section on tafsir. And you have looked at the... You have... we have looked at the sources of tafsir. Yeah. So we want to move on now. What were the sources of tafsir? The sources of tafsir.
Did the Quran explain the Quran?
And then?
The Sunnah, the Prophet explained the Quran.
And then number 3?
Companions.
Sahaba. Then?
And then the Tabi'in.
And then?
The Arabic language itself.
Arabic language and what else? Poetry. And then 6?
Arab. The customs of the Arabs.
So that's included within that, yeah?
Aql Salim.
Aql Salim. Healthy logic. Yeah? Okay. The next section looks at the qualities of a mufassir. Yes, in the book. Let's go through it. So at least we have some appreciation of this, that who should be mufassir and who doesn't qualify to be mufassir. So the qualifications of a mufassir. So they have given a list. So the first is intention. The mufassir's intention of doing the tafsir must be for Allah. So what do we mean by the mufassir? He's going to do tafsir. What do you think we mean by that?
The person who kind of interprets the Quran, like they have, because they like different interpretations and so.
Oh, you opened up a whole conversation there by statement. What do you mean there's different interpretations? What does that mean? What does the mufassir do?
They look at all of the interpretations in order to look at all of the evidence that I've mentioned about the tafsir by opinion. So you look at through all of the different.
Not necessary. That's one aspect, maybe. Mufassir, first, for example, the first mufassirin, what do you think they did?
They used the resources that they had, so
like what?
Like some of the Prophet, for example, they used like his kind of interpretation of the Quran.
You need to be clear what you're saying. I'm not clearly understanding what you're saying. Mufassir is trying to do tafsir, yes? What is tafsir? What does the word tafsir mean?
To The literal meaning is to discover.
Yeah, so what does it mean here? What's the objective of all this?
Is to try to understand the Quran how Allah basically intended.
Absolutely, very good. So when a person goes out to do this, where would he start?
The Quran itself.
Good. Then
Prophet
do you understand this? Makes sense, yeah?
Yeah.
So the Mufassir is not giving his own opinion. This is a misunderstanding. Although we will look at different types of tafsir. Ibrahim, close the door from the kitchen. We will see that there is a tafsir bil Rai. We mentioned that, yeah? Opinionated. But this is after having understood the sources of tafsir, then a person may give his reflection. Tafsir is not, because sometimes it seems, and this is dangerous tafsir, that a person who has not gone through the whole rigor of understanding the ayat in light of the whole Quran and the Sunnah and the Tabi'een and the Arabic language and poetry and customs and all of this. But he's just reading it because he knows Arabic. And he's just thinking, I think this means this. This is not tafsir. Yeah. So therefore the intention of the mufassir should be only to please Allah. Then hopefully you understand what I mean by mufassir. Yeah? Second one is that mufassir himself must be a Muslim with the belief, correct belief in Islam, in Allah, His Messenger, the Akhirah. Because if he is not or she is not from the right belief, then not Muslim, or may have defect in the belief. So then this would impact on the tafsir. Because the bias would be there to just try to bring the meaning that the person believes in himself. The third one is to be free from any type of innovation. Yeah, any innovation. So the person is very stringent, strict in adhering to Quran and the Sunnah of Rasulullah, understood by the Sahaba, and then practiced by the Tabi'in. The person is very stringent on this. Will not allow anything to come into this which is alien bid'ah. Yeah? So the person has to be known for this rigor. Number 4, they say their repentance and a pious heart. So this is not something sometimes you can, calculate, or you can't qualify someone for this, but this is the person's quality by which he is known by his people. That this person has always lived a life of obedience, apparently, in all his affairs, and has always been a person of the deen in all dealings. 3 is fundamentals of the religion. The Aqidah must be very clear about the Aqidah. This person must be very well learned person about Aqidah. Number 6, the methodology of tafsir we mentioned already, yeah, is followed. So the Quran through Quran, then Sunnah, Tabi'in, etc. All of this is rigorously adhered to. Knowledge of the Arabic language to a scholarly level, not just intermediate or basic, but a very good grasp. Yeah, very good grasp. So we mentioned Imam Shafi'i lived 11 years with one of the tribes of Hudayl, I think. 11 years to grasp the language and how every nuance of the language, to know exactly what is meant by these words when people say that in the context. You see, he immersed himself in it for 11 years. And he himself, he was not Arab, he knew Arabic, but he wanted to make sure. And then number 8 is knowledge of grammar. Number 9, knowledge of sarf means where do the words originate from, the roots, and what do they originally mean, and then what are the different derivatives, etc., etc. And then number 10 is again, so this is relevant, like I've said, the word structures. What does this structure of the fi'l, the verb mean? So the person needs to know his Arabic properly, all of this. And then Arabic rhetoric, eloquence, and manners of oratory, of giving speech. What is the style of the Arabs when they speak, when they orate, when they give a speech, when they're public speaking, etc.? What is this style? What was the style of the classic Arabs of that time, the poets, etc.? To appreciate that, to know it well, know it very well. The knowledge, then number 12, of Sahih, Da'if, Shadh, and Batil Qira'ats. To know the knowledge of the Qira'at. We touched upon that, on the 10 Qira'at, etc. To know them, and to know which one is at what level. Number 13, the knowledge of Usul al-Fiqh. So you can imagine now the Mufassir is somebody who knows more or less everything about Islam. SubhanAllah. Not easy job. Then number 14, the knowledge of the fiqh itself. So one is Usul al-Fiqh, like Ulum al-Quran, yeah? This is teaching you the sciences of the Quran. Usul al-Fiqh is teaching you the principles or the fundamentals of fiqh regarding fiqh itself, the principles that the scholars apply to come to a ruling. But then the next point is to know the actual rulings is the actual fiqh. So one is the principles that are applied to get to that ruling, but then to know the rulings as well, not just to know the principles, but to have a thorough knowledge of Islam. Then 15, the asbab al-nuzul, which means the period of revelation and the circumstances of revelation should be well known to the mufassir. So the mufassir should be very well acquainted with the seerah, isn't it? Very well intricate detail of the seerah, the life, the circumstances, the relationships between the tribes, their positions, their dealings, the culture, and to therefore be able to appreciate this is what happened, but to know the context of it as if you are there. You get it, yeah? And then 16, nasikh and mansukh, the things that are abrogated and what abrogated those. The 17, knowledge of hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, especially those ahadith which are clearly related to the tafsir of the Quran. So there are certain ahadith of the Prophet which are clearly related, that he ﷺ said about this ayah or this surah, yeah? Or this matter. But then, so that they're the obvious ones. But then the whole sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, you will find, it will give you principles, understanding, yeah, where you would be able to understand the Quran through that as well. And 18, the knowledge of all the ulum al-Quran, like we're studying briefly, but all of those branches of ulum al-Quran. Ulum al-Quran will also include tajweed rules, yeah, everything about the Quran. And the last point given here is that this person really has to have earned this privilege and this blessing of Allah to be able to actually do the tafsir of the Quran, which only Allah grants, isn't it? So you see this. Now, if people still say that you can have the misunderstandings of the Quran, because the mufassir or this and that, so yeah, it's not very accurate to say that. But as a mufassir, a human can make a mistake in his or her understanding. Yeah. But when you look at the whole knowledge of tafsir by the mufassirin collectively, look at it collectively, like you were saying, yeah? Collectively, then you will find that there's no difference really. You get it? It's very clear. It's writing on the wall what this Quran is saying. But these people, they dedicated their lives for this purpose. SubhanAllah. So these are the characteristics of the mufassir, which is a hard job and a great responsibility to do the tafsir of the Quran, because through it you could guide many people, but you could also misguide people. You see, if you misunderstand something, then many people may take that as the meaning of what the ayah is, and then it could be misguided. So it's a very sensitive role, very sensitive, but highly prestigious if Allah picks that person. Khair. So these are tafsir, the mufassir. It then talks about the different types of tafsir. So tafsir methodology, for example, yeah. So the first methodology is tafsir bil ma'thur. Ma'thur means the athar, the sayings, which essentially is talking about you should be able to, essentially what methodology we've been talking about. Bil ma'thur means the methodology that we can follow, which comes from Quran, explaining Quran, Sunnah explaining it, Sahaba explaining it, Tabi'in explaining it. So this is bil ma'thur, with narrations, to be able to say that this ayah means this because this Tabi'in said this, because this Tabi'in was a student of this Sahabi who said this, who was the student of the Prophet ﷺ who said this, and the Prophet ﷺ said this. So you have chain to be able to say that. And you find that when you read, for example, Tabari, for every word or every ayah, there is an athar, there is a chain. You find it in the Arabic when you read it. Yeah, for every word there is Ibn Abbas said this, the Haq said this, that Ibn Abbas said this, so there's a chain. You see it, subhanAllah. So the mufassir, that mufassir, At-Tabari, he has gone through this effort. Imagine the effort, subhanAllah, for every ayah to be able to find the meaning through this chain. Every ayah, subhanAllah. We can't even read the whole thing in the time that how long it would have taken them to write it and find it. But they did it, mashallah, barakah in their time. So this is bil ma'thur. So the first person that has been mentioned regarding this in this is Imam At-Tabari. Here it is, Jami al-Bayan an ta'wil ayah al-Quran, which means the comprehensive bayan, which means to clarify, explanation regarding the meaning of the ayat of the Quran. This is his tafsir, Muhammad ibn Jarir al-Tabari, and it is known as Tafsir al-Tabari, or sometimes it's called Ibn Jarir's tafsir. That's his name, Ibn Jarir al-Tabari. He died 310 Hijri. Yeah, so it says here 310. We will look at that in more detail next time, because the book then goes on to select some tafasir and to give us more explanation about those tafasir. So we get used to who was the person, what was his angle, what did he do, etc. So this is the first one given. The second one, which is also bil ma'thur, is given here, is Tafsir al-Quran al-Azim by Ar-Razi, Ibn Abi Hatim Ar-Razi. He was a scholar of hadith and he very well knew the ilm of Jarh wa Ta'dil. Jarh wa Ta'dil means narrations and the people, and to be able to classify who is reliable, who isn't, and what level of reliability is this person or not. So this is his tafsir. He died in 327 Hijri, which is after At-Tabari. Then there is Bahr al-Ulum Abu Layth al-Samarqandi, died 375 Hijri. So these people all did tafsir bil ma'thur. Okay, they found the narrations. Number 4 given here is Abu Ishaq al-Tha'labi al-Kashf wal-Bayan and Tafsir al-Quran. To uncover and then to explain the tafsir of the Quran. Literally, that's what it means, the title. But there is a comment here by Ibn Taymiyyah regarding his tafsir, that he has also, without probably realizing, Wallahu alam, the tafsir also includes some fabricated ahadith. Yeah, in this one that I've just mentioned, number 4. And some Israeliyat are mentioned. So, but anyway, that has been dealt with because then the scholars have sifted that, you see. Yeah, which is good because now you know this is Sahih and this is not. Even when you read Ibn Kathir, Tafsir of Ibn Kathir, in the Urdu one I have, it has more detail, I think, than the English one. You read a whole paragraph or two of a hadith, and then in the end it says, but this is gharib, this is weak hadith, or this is fabricated hadith. But he's brought it, but he has also then given the classification.
So if it's fabricated, they don't remove it.
No, because you see, that's a good question, but you see, that's good in a way, because you know this is fabricated hadith. Now you won't take it. If you didn't know it's fabricated, problem, eh? So it's good. So I used to think this before. I used to think, why did the scholars collect? Because there are collections of fabricated ahadith. I was thinking, what's the point of that? Why spend time collecting fabricated ahadith? And the point is so that you know they're fabricated. So you can't misunderstand things. If you appreciate that, you know? So alhamdulillah, the scholars of hadith especially, they have done such an amazing job.
And in general, in terms of fabricated hadith, like if it doesn't deal with like your aqidah, then like are you able to? Are you still? Is it alright to still like use?
There are different opinions. Now, fabricated is fabricated,
Yeah,
isn't
like
it? It's no, it's not weak. Weak is za'if. Weak hadith is a hadith which may have some weakness in its narration or the narrators. Mawdu, fabricated, is a lie. Of course, you won't take that because it's a lie.
Yeah.
Weak hadith, because there are gradations of hadith. Yeah, weak hadith. Some scholars will say you can take it for a'mal, actions, but not for aqidah. But this is detailed. The scholars they, and then there is difference of opinion in the usul fiqh, usul hadith, that you know what what can we or can we not take from weak hadith. So again, that's a whole area of study for the scholars of hadith. Khair. It goes through others as well, but then it goes on to so in a whole list. I don't want to read through all of them. I just read the names. At least we get some familiarity with these types of tafsir. Number 5 is Al-Baghawi, Ma'alim al-Tanzil by Baghawi. Number 6 is Al-Andalusi. Number 7 is Ibn Kathir al-Damishqi. This is the one that we known as Tafsir ibn Kathir, Tafsir al-Quran al-Azim. This is number 7 by Ibn Kathir al-Damishqi. So he was from Damascus. And as I mentioned, we will look at that later. Then one by Al-Thalabi. Number 9 is by Jalaluddin al-Suyuti. Jalaluddin al-Suyuti. So this is also known. Then later, much later, if you look here now, by a tafsir in 1250 Hijri by Ash-Shawkani, Fath al-Qadir. And then the last one that's mentioned here, which is very, very recent, 1393. This is Adwa al-Bayan fi Ida al-Quran bil-Quran by Ash-Shanqiti. We mentioned this book before when we were looking at Quran, explaining the Quran. In that section, they mentioned that this is, in the other book, the Mufti Taqi Usmani's book, he mentioned this is a must for any student of tafsir to have this. And I think it's 7 volumes. And he has specialized in the Quran, explaining the Quran in this. So these are the tafsir that have been mentioned as the tafsir bil ma'thur. They have gone through that rigorous process of collecting all the evidence from Quran, Sunnah, Sahaba, Tabi'in, etc. Then he talks about Birrai, just based on opinions. So we said that one is Birrai Mahmud, which is praiseworthy, that a person bases his opinion on that rigor that we mentioned already, and then gives an opinion. But there is Mahzum, yeah, that which is blameworthy tafsir, Birrai, which a person gives his opinion without knowing the rest of the stuff. And then would, of course, not get to the right meaning. So he's given lots of examples of the different types. Birrai. So you should just make a point of at least reading through it once so that you have some familiarity with it. That's all. Okay. It then goes through the tafsir of the jurists, the people of fiqh. So they have focused their tafsir on the aspects of all the matters relating to fiqh. So salah, for example, zakah, hajj, divorce, marriage, buying, selling, fiqh matters. They have focused on those aspects of the tafsir. So they've given different examples. One is Abu Bakr Razi's Jassas. Then Bayhaqi's Ahkam al-Quran. Number 3, Ibn al-Arabi's Tafsir Ahkam al-Quran. And then Qurtubi, you may have heard him, famous Mufassir, al-Qurtubi. So Al-Jami' li Ahkam al-Quran. So he has collected the Ahkam of the Quran in his tafsir. His focus has been the Ahkam, the Hukum that comes from this ayah. Yeah. That's quite extensive as well. And then Ibn Jawzi's, and then after that, there are many others given here, just to have an appreciation. They then talk about scientific tafsir. The problem with this is that scientific tafsir, this is and this is discussed in Taqi Usmani's book, that this is a phenomenon, especially when the Muslims were colonized, especially when they were subdued and they were then ruled by the powers of Europe, like the English and the French, etc. who had gone through a history of religiosity, but then because their religious beliefs and practices, they were not based on revelation, they were based on people's opinions. Then as time passed, people rebelled against, like for example, Christianity. And therefore they then broke away from religious beliefs and practices and became more secular, based on their logic. And therefore science became everything because it made sense, whereas religion, because it wasn't preserved, this was a religion that people made, it didn't make sense. So therefore they became strong and powerful in scientific means, if you like, through discovery, etc. And then when they colonized Muslim countries, the Muslims were impressed by this because of the power and civilization that they brought, because whenever there is a civilization that rules over anybody, then that has an impression on the people who are being subdued. So then some scholars in the past, especially, I mean, the ones who I know of in India, Pakistan region, subcontinent, they made the mistake of trying to explain everything in the Quran in scientific terms, you see. And this went to the extreme of denying certain of our beliefs in the unseen. So for example, angels. So because you cannot physically or scientifically prove the existence of an angel, so they tried to interpret it differently. They try to interpret jinns differently now. They try to interpret the miracles in the Quran as something different. So instead of saying that, believing that Allah parted the sea for Musa, yeah, so scientifically, this is not acceptable. That how can the sea part? You can't. Water, yeah? You can't. So fire, how can it not burn? It burns. So then they said that this was maybe a metaphor for something else. Or they said that, no, it meant that there was the sea comes in sometimes, in the evening, the sea comes in, the water comes in, so it's high wave, high tide, low tide. So they said that it was low tide when Musa left and he went through, but when Firaun came, it was high tide. This is what it means. You understand? So they were impressed. Mar'ub is called Mar'ub. Ra'ab. You know Ra'ab? You know Ra'ab, Ibrahim? Ra'ab is to be under the inferiority to somebody's superiority. You are under Ra'ab. So they tried to do this, and then you mess everything up then. You're left with nothing in the end. You try to reinterpret everything to suit what? To suit the mind of the time. But the biggest issue with that, of course, the biggest issue with that is that it's wrong. But the other issue with that is with time, people's mind thinks and changes. So scientific discovery changes over time. So you would then reinterpret it. You reinterpret it. You reinterpret it. What is this? That made sense for scriptures that are not preserved, which were written by man. But it should be the opposite when it's a preserved scripture of Allah. You have to understand everything in light of the preserved scripture from Allah, instead of trying to reinterpret and change everything. So then he discusses that in the scientific tafsir. Khair. And this is very dangerous nowadays. People are, I heard myself these people talking about evolution. So Muslim, I don't know if they are scientists or what they are, but they were saying that yes, now that we have found out this it is time to reinterpret these verses. You see? So this is wrong. This is defeat. You think you're subdued by the scientific mind. They don't realize, they should realize they're scientists if they are. That science itself is shifting. Science every day shifts. The more you find out, the more you understand things, you change your view, you change your opinion on things. So how can you make that the yardstick that is changing? How can you make that? It's just like, they say you've changed the goalposts. So that's what you're doing constantly. So this is important to understand that. They then talk about tafsir batini tafsir. Yeah, tafsir of inner meanings. Because batan means inside. Yeah, batan means your stomach, inside of your stomach. So some people, they say that these ayat, there is a hidden meaning to it. So what would you say to that? Person says there is a hidden meaning to these verses in the Quran. The whole Quran, there is also a hidden meaning to it. And this is what it is. So what should it be your first question?
What do you mean by hidden meaning?
Exactly. What does it mean by hidden? And then who are you to say what you said is the hidden meaning? You get it? What is your yardstick of saying this means this? This is the spiritual meaning of it. Because anybody can come and then give any meaning of it. Again, that's birrai again. But this is trying to always bring things towards your spirituality, forcing it towards that rather. So they have given some criteria, conditions. As long as these conditions are met, then if somebody does bring a tafsir which is claimed to be hidden, then it may be considered, yeah? So first of all, no fiqh rulings or aqidah will be derived from such tafsir. Okay. Number two, that the ishari interpretation, which means that the suggestive or the suggested meaning does not contradict the apparent meaning of the verse. Number three, the ishari, again, what did I say? Suggested, isn't it? Interpretation is not claimed to be the only or primary meaning of the verse. Number four, this suggested meaning does not contradict other aspects of the Sharia or common sense. That this interpretation has some basis for it in the Sharia. It's not just out of the blue. That it is not presumed that belief in the Ishari interpretation is obligatory. Yeah. So with all of these conditions, then you may consider. And he mentioned that this is basically on birra, isn't it? Their opinion, but it's not based on anything. So therefore, it's very difficult. It's very dangerous to do that. And he mentions some extreme Sufi people who have done this to interpret the Quran as they want, and then he gives some indication. So let's take one ayah as an indication example. He says tafsir concerning the story of Talut when he tested his people. Yeah, so Talut was the leader who was appointed to Bani Israel to lead them against the enemy, yeah, Goliath, to lead them against Goliath. So then when Talut set out with his army, he said to the believers, "Verily Allah will test you with the river. Whoever drinks from it, he will not be with me. except he, if he takes a sip with his hand, yet all drank of it except a few of them. So now the batini, or the inner meaning that people are giving, some scholars said in the interpretation of this verse that the river is meant to be a parable of this world. Whoever drinks from it excessively will fail, and whoever abandons it totally cannot survive. But the one who takes the bare minimum of what he needs is the one who will be successful. After quoting this interpretation, Imam al-Qurtubi said, "And how beautiful is this, were it not for the fact that it involves excessive interpretation and a distortion of the apparent meanings of the verse." Imam Qurtubi has said this is not the right understanding we should take from this ayah. You can have this opinion, but don't say this is the meaning of this verse. Do you understand? Do you see the difference, yeah? You may say that, yeah, in the dunya, we should take what we need and not more than that. But don't then try to interpret this verse to mean that. This is the problem. So the people who are, there are some people, I don't know if you have had any interaction with Hizb ut-Tahrir. I don't know if they're around anymore. Are they any, you don't know them? That means you don't know them. Good, khalas. Fair enough. But some people have a certain agenda. So for example, you might find a group of Muslims who have just political thought in their mind. So they will interpret every ayah politically. Some people will have a very spiritual or Sufi orientation. They will try to interpret everything in that aspect. Some people might have a jihad on their mind all the time. So they just want to interpret everything to do with jihad. Everything is proof of jihad. Some people are very staunch against the Barelvi, so they will interpret everything against the Barelvi. You get it? So this is not the right approach to take to understand the Kalam of Allah. Kalam of Allah, you have to give into it. Find what Allah is saying and follow it, not make it follow what you want. This is totally opposite, isn't it? Yeah. So there's other examples of this type of tafsir people claim to have the inner meaning for. When did we start? I don't remember.
Yes, 4:30.
Okay, we'll give another 10 minutes. So then again, he has mentioned the modernistic tafsirs again, as I mentioned already. One of them was Sir Sayyid Ahmad Khan. He's well known for his, and he tried to bring the Muslims out of slavery by enlightening them to study sciences, etc., which was a good move, but then the problem was that it then became far-fetched, yeah, as I explained about the things that they misinterpreted from the Quran. And he has given some examples of these tafasir, so we know of them. He has mentioned Sayyid Qutb's fi Zilal al-Quran in this, and he's highlighted some of the errors, which I was not aware of before. But khair, just to know. And then inshallah, we will start to look at from next time some of the famous tafsirs, yeah? So At-Tabari's Jami al-Bayan, which we already mentioned, we'll look at that in detail. Then Ibn Kathir, we'll know a bit more about that. Al-Razi's Mafatih al-Ghaib, we'll know more about that, inshallah. Zamakhshari's Al-Kashaf. So you will find a lot of these have been referenced in a lot of tafsir material. So it's good to have some understanding of these. And then he looks at the dangers of improper tafsir, of course, which hopefully I think we are appreciating. Alhamdulillah. Anything to ask?
All of these types of tafsir. So if we were to read them, that we only get this aspect of tafsir, we wouldn't get any sort of mixture. Yeah. So if I were to read a tafsir based on the inner meaning, that's all we would find.
Yeah.
Nothing to do with.
Yeah. Well, if that is if that tafsir has had only that target in mind, but there are tafsir which don't just do that. They will maybe look at different aspects. Yeah, you will find that.
So like, I mean, like tafsir, like the famous one, like Ibn Kathir, which we have like access to. So this is just based on narration, and nothing to
Yeah.
do with anything else.
Yes, so you will find in Ibn Kathir there is of course, Quran bil Quran. You'll see that. You see through this the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, sayings of the Sahaba, sayings of the Tabi'in. Sometimes it mentions the different qiraat as well. He will talk about. I'm not sure if it talks about Nasikh Mansukh. Maybe he will mention that. I think it does sometimes. Yeah. But these aspects are in there.
So I mean, as a reader, then would you want to look at the other aspects as well, or would you just want to?
Which aspects?
As in, so you got like the based on narrations,
Mm.
which is obviously Ibn Kathir, and the other ones. But then, if you were to read the other ones,
Like what?
is it
What aspect I'm asking?
like personal opinions, any of them?
It's best
Based
not
on
to,
jurists?
for us as students who are beginning to understand the Ulum al-Quran and getting familiar with tafsir, I think what's really important is for us to have a very good grounding in the tafsir bil ma'thur, really solid grounding of the whole, have to go through the whole Quran at least once, at least, by looking at Quran, through Sunnah, through Sahaba, through Tabi'in, etc. clearly, then you have a very clear, robust framework. You'll be very clear. Then if you want to, you may look at others. Yeah, but what we need to really realize and emphasize is, why are we reading Quran and why are we reading Tafsir? That's the bottom line. For guidance. Yeah. So for example, a person who is a research scholar, let's say, yeah, or research student, he may want to research other tafsir from that angle and find out. Fair enough. But for me or you, do I have time to read those other things that really, if anything, might actually confuse what I understood properly? So we have to be very sensible in that and selective, because we don't have a lot of time. And is it, what's the goal? What's the goal? You should be driven by the goal. That okay. Yeah, I think this is why I feel experienced. I mean, by reading tafsirs over some years now, this is what I'm thinking of now. That, you know what, let's look at tafsir properly. So Ibn Kathir, and I read a tafsir by somebody who was in Pakistan. In fact, Taqi Usmani's dad, rahimahullah. Yeah. So his tafsir, Ma'arif al-Quran, is very, very well known in Pakistan, India. Very well known, Ma'arif al-Quran. So he takes from Ibn Kathir and At-Tabari and the other famous tafsir. He was the Grand Mufti of Pakistan. So I feel very content when I read that and Ibn Kathir. And if I will also read, I'll sometimes look at Tafhim al-Quran by Maulana Maududi. So Maulana Maududi is essentially from what I've read of his, he is taking from those sources, but he's not giving the narrations of those sources, if you like. He's rather just summarizing it. So he has his own style, if you like. But these I find very, because it's solid. You know what you're getting, because Ibn Abbas said this, Ibn Masud said this, Aisha said this, this is stuff. This is the stuff you want grounding, because it forms your mind and thinking. You start thinking, seeing things like that. This is what we need. We need that. Because if you don't have that, what do you have? You go with the flow, then you don't know. So that's what I would suggest. Allah Allah. Abdullah there? Abdullah Khan, we didn't admit him. La hawla wa la quwwata illa billah. Abdullah, we didn't admit you. Astaghfirullah. Ya Allah, Abdullah loving it. Huh? Abdullah loving it. He couldn't hear us. Can you see him?
Yeah.
Rude boy with his hat on. Abdullah, man, you should have found one of them, innit, if you were that desperate.
I was waiting this whole time.
MashaAllah. Allah will reward you. Yeah, you didn't find any of them to say admit me. Ya Allah.
Oh, I found the house, but no one picked up.
Yeah, I don't know what's happening. Maybe, I don't know, maybe you can listen to the recording or
I'll listen to the recording, inshallah.
inshallah. Okay then, Jazakallah.